Welcome to Summerlin Church. I'm Peter By. In a moment, Bart Tarman will bring us the message for this second Sunday of Advent, Casting Out Our Demons. Kathleen, Sieck and Rob Hodges will sing and play another beautiful song of Christmas, Come Thou Long-Expected Jesus. Then Bart returns with an update on our $30,000 challenge grant and how you can help us meet our goal of closing and erasing our deficit by the end of this year. So please stay tuned for that. Jenny Slaraw reads our children's story, He's Here, about Mary and Joseph and their journey to Bethlehem. As we wait with great anticipation for Christmas Day, we also light another of our Advent candles. Last week, it was the Hope Candle. Today, we light the Peace Candle and hear these prophetic words from Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 6. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the kid. The calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. Isn't that good news? Wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us today. Now, here's Bart with the message, Casting Out Our Demons.
Well, welcome to Summerlin Church. As we enter this Advent season, we're glad you're with us. As you can see, we're back in the sanctuary again, which we wanted to do in Advent, just to give us a feel, especially those of us in the local area, what it's like to be back in the sanctuary. It feels good to me, except no people. I know you're there, but I wish I could see your faces. You know, I was looking up Advent the other day, and as David pointed out last week, it is a season of waiting, but it's waiting for the advent of something, the start of something, the ongoingness of something. And that start is the advent of the Christ. The light that shined on every human being was coming into the world. And later it says, we saw his glory, the glory as of one and the only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. And it's that we're waiting for, that full manifestation. And that's why we have these candles here. We're in the second week of that. And that's why I did a painting last year. I challenged myself to do a painting of Advent. And the idea of it was, from a very abstract view, the light coming into the darkness. And the darkness cannot put it out. Light dispels darkness. And we're going to be looking at that a little later in this sermon and in the next 2 or 3 sermons. That light comes in and dispels our darkness. So we've been in this series on healing and transformation, and we're continuing it, looking at the actual physical healings Jesus did and asking the question, how does that apply to today? And we looked at his healing of blind people and said, well, maybe for us it can mean healing our sight so that we see things as they really are and not how our prejudices and preconceived notions might filter them to make it seem different than reality. See clearly. We looked at people who were deaf that Jesus healed and they could then hear, and we talked about healing the voices that we hear some negative voices, self-condemning voices, versus the voice of the Son of God or the Holy Spirit or the Father, the voice of a divine presence saying, you are loved as you are. So healing our hearing of those stories about our lives that lead us into self-destructive tendencies versus the story of our life, which is in the context of who God is. And finally, we looked at if we're paralyzed, if we're stuck, if we can't move on in our life, something's held us stuck physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. How can, and just like Jesus healed paralysis, how can he heal our paralysis in a different sense? And today I'm going to take on something pretty wild for a Presbyterian church. We're going to talk about Jesus' role in casting out demons. How are we healed from our own demons? You know, we have that kind of phrase where we say, wow, he's got a lot of demons. I think that we might be on to something there. But I'd like to tell you a story, not really a story, but share something about a good friend of mine who's now passed away. He was a Roman Catholic priest. I used to bring him to Westmont College when I was the chaplain there. His name, and many of you may have read some of his books. Brennan Manning is his name. He wrote a wonderful book called Lion and Lamb, The Relentless Tenderness of Jesus. You've heard me use that phrase, the relentless tenderness of Jesus. That was Brennan's phrase. He was a writer. He was a creative writer. He had a master's degree in it. But he was the best preacher I've ever heard. And he preached not like I do from some notes. He wrote it out by hand, memorized every word. And when you'd think it might be a little stilted, but I'd bring him to chapel. We'd have 1,000 students the first day, or maybe 800. And then the word got out, oh my word, you got to hear this guy. And it would be all 1,200 students there and faculty. And then the next day, all the staff would start showing up. And then people from the community. And people's lives were being healed by his message. And it was a message of casting out demons by the grace of God. I mean, maybe not those exact words. He was the greatest preacher of grace, the unconditional favor of God that I've ever known. His great phrase, which I use all the time, is that God loves you as you are, not as you should be. You're loved as you are right now, with your demons, with your bad habits, with your struggles. You are loved right now. That was one of his great lines. And when he finished speaking about this wonderful getting rid of our demons sort of through the grace of God, I would have student after student after student and faculty member and staff members for probably 2 weeks afterwards coming into my office saying, is that true? Is it that good? Is God that good? I mean, they didn't say those exact words, but that was the gist of it. They had a hard time believing that this grace was so stupendous. And I'd say, yes, it's true. Okay, next. Then the next person come in and say this. Is it really true? Yes, it's really true. Okay, next. Not really, but there was this overwhelming healing that happened on our campus when he was there. Now, if the story stopped there, it's a pretty wonderful story. And Brennan used to share his own demons. He would talk about them. He was a recovering alcoholic. He said he'd been sober for many years, and when I say alcoholic, he was what we call a chronic addictive alcoholic. So if he took a drink, he didn't just get sloppy. He would take a drink, and he would not stop drinking until he woke up in jail or literally in a gutter. And I mean literally, he did it many times. And he'd talk about that in the past tense. Well, then we found out later in his life as he was dying that he was dying of what is called wet brain disease, which is an alcohol-induced disease where your brain, it just dies away from all the alcohol use and abuse. And we found out, as he wrote in his last book, which he didn't quite finish because he died, I believe the title is All is Grace, or Grace is All, I forget which. And he basically said, I didn't live up to my message. I wasn't able to do it all the time. I kept drinking. I would sneak off. I'd be sober when I'd be speaking, like at Westmont, and then the next week I'd go on a binge. And he said, I lied to you, I lied to my friends, I lied to my family, I lied to myself. But he said, but the message is true. All is grace. It's all about grace. The message is true, even though I couldn't live up to it fully. Well, what do I mean when I talk about casting out demons in our life? Well, what exactly would a demon mean in today's world? I would say it's something that holds you captive. I think we've all got them. I mean, everyone listening to this and the person giving this talk, we've all got some of these demons. They hold us, and we don't want them to hold us, but they do. It could be a grudge. It could be fear. It could be arrogance. It could be money. It could be a lot of things. It could be this sense of, I just don't have enough, and if I had a little bit more, these glass half empty sort of thoughts, the limited resource fear, and so I've got to compete against everybody else, and it's win or lose. That could be a demon you struggle with. It's something that compels you to do things that in your normal, better self you wouldn't be doing or saying. It's something that, in fact, tyrannizes you. It doesn't just hold a grip on you, it actually tyrannizes you as it goes on. Those are the demons, a Jekyll and Hyde kind of life. You know, 1 minute we're Jekyll and the next minute we're Hyde. You know, 1 minute we're talking about how much we love our spouse and the next minute we're yelling at them or maybe even cursing. we all have these things. We all have some struggles we need to be set free from. Sometimes these demons are many. You remember the story in Mark 5, where Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee with his disciples because of a storm, wound up in another country, literally different people group, and out from the tombs ran this crazy man who'd been chained up, and he could break the chains with superhuman strength, and he was a cutter. He'd cut himself with stones. He'd be screaming in the middle of the night. He comes running toward Jesus, and the disciples are saying, "We told you we shouldn't have come over here with those people," you know. And so here's this Gentile crazy man full of demons, and he runs up to Jesus and says, "What have you got to do with me? Leave me alone." And Jesus says, "Who are you?" And the demoniac, as he's been called, says, "My name is Legion, for there are many of us." A legion was a large group of soldiers in the Roman army. He had many, many demons. And ultimately, Jesus cast those demons out. In fact, my sense is that the very presence of Jesus, when it shows up, it forces out anything that's not love. There's not room for both. And so he exorcised these demons. The man was naked too when he came running out, and so they clothed him, and he's sitting at Jesus' feet, it says, in his right mind, and then his countrymen see him, and they're actually more afraid of him now that he's sane, because they can't figure out what's happened. And it was a tremendous thing. Some of us have many demons, sadly. Some of us are dealt a really tough hand in our childhood. Some of us were dealt tough hands later on. And there's, you might feel for you that there's just too much to take care of. Let the presence of Jesus force those out. There's another story of the famous Mary of Magdalen. Mary, number one, she was not a prostitute. That's a misunderstanding of the scriptures. There was another woman who was a prostitute that came to Jesus, but it was not Mary of Magdalen, we don't believe. But it says Mary of Magdala in Luke verse 8, it talks about all the women followers of Jesus, and it always mentions Mary first. She's kind of like, whenever it mentions the guy disciples, Peter's always mentioned first. When it mentions the women disciples, and by the way, there were women disciples, Luke 8 verses 1 through 4 names a bunch of them. It always names Mary first. She must have been powerful. She was there at the resurrection, or at least at the post-resurrection scene. She saw Jesus personally. He spoke to her after he'd risen from the dead. She must have been an incredibly special person. But in Luke 8, it says, and one of these that followed Jesus from town to town was Mary of Magdala, from whom 7 demons had been cast out. See, she had many. And somehow the presence of Jesus, the love of Jesus, you are loved as you are, not as you should be, Jesus, forced out those demons. So sometimes there's many, sometimes there's only one. It's just one issue in your life that nags at you and you can't seem to break it. Sometimes they come and go, you know. You think, oh, hey, I'm doing a lot better on anger, let's say. And then all of a sudden some little thing happens and you flare into a rage. It's back again. Then it goes, then it's back. Sometimes they don't go and come. Sometimes they settle in. They sort of set up home. And they're a little harder to get out. So what would it be like now? Well, in a sense, that's what Advent is about. You see, as this painting of mine shows, the light came out of darkness and dispels the darkness. Just light shows up and darkness flees. And it's like if I took, well, when we did take water and we poured it in this glass, before that there was air in the glass. We pour water in and it dispels the air. I'm sure a scientist could do it the other way around and put air in and dispel the water. But one presence of something stronger forces out the other. So how do we dispel our demons? Well, I think it's by experiencing the increasing presence, like the water in the glass, like the light in the darkness, the increasing presence of God's loving power. It will just force things out. Let's take light, for example. I'm going to encourage you to open the aperture of your heart and your eyes and your life. The aperture on a camera lets more light in. The aperture in your eyes, when your pupils dilate, it lets more light in. Well, there's light all around us. It's not like we have to ask God to get bigger or God to send more light. There's plenty of light. We have to let it in. And so in the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about ways to open up that aperture and let the light in to dispel some of our own demons. We started with talking about Advent, that we're waiting for the coming of Christ, the advent of the Christ. And we're waiting for a good message that has two basic parts to it. One, what we want to experience, and this is what helps cast out our demons, is a God who is for us and a God who is with us. Ultimately, a God who's also in us. But the first two are the great need of the hour, that we would find this God who is with us and this God who is for us. It would be quite sad if he was just with us but against us. But he's with us in the person of Jesus Christ, and he's for us. And if we allow him more spaciousness in our life, he will expel little by little or all at once. It's his business and has a lot to do with how we cooperate with opening, making more room for this light, for this love, for this loving power in whose presence no demon can even exist. Thanks, Rob and Kathleen, for that beautiful music. I wanted to give the church a quick 1-minute update on our finances. As you know, we were projecting a $60,000 deficit as of a month or so ago. And then we had a number of you step forward and create a $30,000 matching gift. And we have already matched 10,000 of that. And if we match all 30, it will release that $60,000 and we will end the year without a deficit. And so I just want you to know how thankful I am, our team is, for all the generosity you've shown. We've still got a ways to go. And so as you're thinking about your year-end giving to this church and to other organizations, give some thought to helping us close that gap. Here's how you can do it. You go on our website and you push the Give button. And don't worry, that doesn't mean you're going to give right that second. It's just going to bring up a screen that will tell you how to give. And you can give online if you choose to. There's even a place to say matching gift there. Or it'll give you the information for where you can just send a check. And so you could give that way. It gives our land address here. So push the Give button. All the information comes up. We have $20,000 to go to match that gift of 30, which will close out our year. And wouldn't that be great in this turbulent year to wind up in the black with no deficit? I thank you for your generosity. It's your hard-earned money, and any penny that you choose to give to this ministry is really greatly appreciated.